I thought of making a small presentation on the activity of sourcing. I don't know how much of enthusiasm or interest they will have in this subject. Nonetheless, it's an activity that needs to be addressed and understood by all kinds of practitioners in the world of business so that they don't make mistakes in their sourcing decisions. If anything has changed in the world in the last few decades, it's the way that we source. Now, I don't know if there are many other. This is sometimes called as planning in some certain organizations, though of course it is materials planning. The very word called planning is some kind of a misnomer. Organizations and businesses around the world need to call this department the way it is to be called. It's called sourcing, or you could also call it as material planning. But material planning would be an understatement because much of what we source may not necessarily be material or may not be tangible. There are some certain principles of sourcing, especially when I used to work in factories. I have had sudden demands on the sourcing function. That is in an era when there was no internet and the whole problem was compounded. Today we have got the internet, which makes the job of sourcing much easier and at the same time perilous because of various kinds of asymmetries that exist in the kind of people you generally get to talk to. Now, I was once upon a time reading a case study of Boeing. I don't know if to what extent I'm accurate on the statistical front, but they have um, more than 500 or so suppliers around the world. Please correct me if I'm not totally correct. I'm roughly putting up a number like that, but I'm trying to drive home a very simple concept: the importance of sourcing. In the absence of sourcing, many industrial establishments or commercial establishments may not work to its fullest levels of capacity and ability. Now, in the last 10 or 20 years, the biggest seen in Europe is that various constituent countries of Europe help each other on the sourcing function. So much so today, I think Airbus industry is a very big leader in the airplane sector, giving a tough kind of competition to other kind of people in this segment, in the passenger plane segment. It was very amusing to me. I was standing at Kolkata Airport, Dum Dum International Airport, some months back, and I looked around at all the planes. All of them are A320. Now that shows the kind of market penetration A320 has got. That's just an observation. To my mind, it is because larger cooperation between in the sourcing function among various constituents of Europe who are more ready, more forthcoming, more visible to part with many things that they might be need. Mark my words. Mark my words. I'm going to tell something which is highly futuristic. India, as a country, before long, is going to become a very important trading partner to the Eurozone. I'm just saying Europe, assuming that all the countries in Europe are joining hands together and working under some which are partnership they're doing now. China has its own internal sourcing mechanism because it's a very large country. Um, Russia again has its again a very large country. But it is not far when a large scale cooperation between European Union and Russia cannot be totally avoided. Or the day is not too far when there will be more economic partnership and cooperation between Russia and the European Union, because Russia sees European Union in their backyard as a very important trading partner, because many of the products what they make or the raw materials they will make has got immediate utility in Europe, and that kind of pressures is, mark my words, what I was trying to tell you. India is going to be drawn into such kind of sourcing wars. I won't just say wars. It's not sourcing wars. Sourcing wave like never before because of unified Europe. And unified Europe is going to pose a serious, not a pose a serious. I'm not saying a serious challenge. It's going to be a serious player for even the various African countries which are not very far from the shores of some of these Eurozone or European Union countries. Something that I like to say, which means which means simply said that Indians would be making various kinds of products in across a large spectrum of sectors. We'll have to make. We will have to build such kind of resilience and technology, train people better for a long-term career in many of these aspects, so that they fit the bill when the wave is going to peak shortly. With India, we would need the support of other small countries which are our neighbors, invariably, to for us to ride that boom to some extent. Now, such kind of sourcing situations are likely to come in the world that we live in. But for the time being, let us try to see some of what are the aspects of sourcing. If you are something at sourcing today, some of the aspects of sourcing is the sourcing is highly global because of the internet. The visibility of many smaller companies is very high because of the web. Um, so sourcing is relatively a much easier function today. What would be the role of the United States in the scenario that is likely going to emerge? Is something that has been seriously thought about by the leaders of the United States. Although a very good option would be to build their trade and other kinds of economic relations with the entire South American continent for it to even progress even more rapidly, or to handle some of its economic issues, because there's a kind of a global polarization, not I won't say polarization, dynamism that we are likely to enter into. The American continent light divide will find difficult to do many things what it did in the past across the Atlantic because of larger cohesion between European, Russian, to a lesser extent China, India, and African countries per se. Because there's a kind of new world order that might likely emerge. America is not lost in the game because it has to improve its trade relations with the large continent of Southern America, which, to my understanding, is still highly untapped for various kinds of sourcing and trading relations. Now, what do we try to some quickly to the aspects of academic aspects of sourcing very very quickly, so that we understand what sourcing is. Sourcing largely comes from the concept of theory of comparative advantage. What is the meaning of that? I don't make things which I can buy at a lesser cost. That is the idea of theory of comparative advantage. If I can buy something at a lesser cost, I will make much a small fraction of what I used to make before. Much of it I will source from outside because the overall costs and the cycle times involved are much less. And I can make use of many of my essential resources for other more productive needs is one of the ideas around which sourcing works. But I'll be forced to go and make certain things that's called as vertical integration over a period of time if I find that for some reason of the law or some other reasons I'm not able to source something. Sourcing around the world is also controlled by law. I hope I can make a clear head or tail of what we're trying to talk about sourcing so that we get a crystal clear picture. Anyone who wants to understand what sourcing is to some extent can, once they go through this lecture, can to some extent have an grasp of what it is. Now, I have told that in theory of comparative advantage, I will buy something which I will buy something from around me, and it is more easier for me to buy than to make. Now, what kind of an example can I give for this? See, the auto industry has always ruled the world. There are many new auto players coming around the world. When I say auto players, I mean cars and passenger buses and lorries and trucks and all that. It's a highly globalized industry. In India, my car segment has got many kinds of players. When you look on the road, you see even today Tatas have become a major player in the car sector. I see Volkswagen, I see Suzuki, I see recently I was seeing Kia, I see many of them, most of them international brands. I see Ford. Now, automobile manufacturers and that industry is slightly highly fragmented today with the various kinds of spare parts manufacturers. And now I hope I can drive something very clear to you. What am I trying to say? The auto industry of today would be to a large extent something called as a virtual corporation. Virtual corporation means that I source most of my components from around me and I assemble them very fast at a central location to make cars. I, as an organization, have less amount of involvement in making many of the spares. Could be the trend into which this auto industry, which is a very more than 100-year-old industry, is largely working. That means I have an assembly plant somewhere where I am careful. I choose a central location where I've got many international markets around me. I am in the business of making very fast cars, mass manufacturing of cars. I cannot make all the space that the cars need. Increasingly with time, I am giving because my core competence is the assembly of cars. Increasingly, I am giving the owners of making most of the spare parts of cars to many other kinds of players. I am in searching, I'm sourcing, I am trying to find out who are the players who can give me this specification, or I can develop him so that he can give it very fast. This comes under the concept of core competence. What is sourcing? Please understand this. What is the advantage of sourcing? I work around my core competence. My core competence is assembly of cars. My core competence is not carburetor and spark plug. Carburetor and spark plug, there are others in the world who have got core competence who are able to make it at a much lesser price. So I buy it from them because anyway it's very economic for me to buy for them. I get to kind of relationships, partnerships with them, which are largely governed and under the overall ambit of the law, so that I can source them and make cars fast. A good thing for the not just the economy of the organization, for the entire world economy, because people are getting to work. I'm getting to some kind of a lean situation where people are working around their core competences, core competency, thereby increasing overall efficiency and reducing costs of the cars and products that I make. I hope I've made my point clear. Something I told you about sourcing. The theory of comparative advantage is what, to a large extent, drives sourcing as markets become more and more competitive. Now, what is the second principle of sourcing, if at all you want to say? What would be? I've just told the principles of sourcing. First principle is comparative advantage. Second principle of sourcing is I must always have more than one supplier for a product. If I rely on just one supplier, I am under risk. Also, in important aspect of sourcing, I must be constantly willing to research and find out new partners who can provide me with the same specification of products. Is also a principle of sourcing. Now, I've told two principles of sourcing. Is there any other idea or concept around which sourcing? First thing, theory of comparative advantage. Second thing, I have to make more than one supplier for any product that is sourced, so that the seller power reduces of the person who is selling the product to me. If I do not have more than one supplier, then if there is any problem with one supplier, my whole production will halt because I've just learned one supplier. I'm into research to find many other suppliers for the same product, the same thing. In the event there's a mishap, I contact the others so that my manufacturing activity does not get held up beyond a point. This is important to sourcing. It also comes under the aspect of materials management, because at the end of the day, to a large extent, we are handling material. Is there any other kind of principle that governs sourcing? Is what I'm trying to find out. I'm trying to say. Yeah. The third principle of sourcing is always monitor your what we call whom you source from for the quality. Now, constantly you must visit his plants or whatever it might be once in a while to see that he is able to provide everything that he needs with a high degree of quality. It also means that you ensure that he works with high degree of quality. I have to do constantly some kind of quality inspection so that I don't get any mistakes or I don't get bad products getting into my system. You'll be interested to know that today I've got a concept called as VMI, Vendor Managed Inventory. My inventory positions. This is where IT platforms like ERP helps largely in sourcing. ERP is enterprise resource planning. It helps in the area of sourcing and on the concept of VMI called as vendor managed inventory. Vendor managed inventory also creates a virtual corporation. A virtual corporation, 100% of what is done is all sourced from outside. I only do some assembly and testing work. Is a concept of virtual corporation. The world might be tending towards a virtual corporation, but well, might be tending to a virtual corporation. But I've got some concept of vendor managed inventory. Now I'll try to give some of these ideas around which maybe something around which this function of sourcing is supposed to work. I hope you understand to some extent what this function. I hope I can give you one more example of sourcing. In your own house, you source milk, you source vegetables, you source many things to survive. Consumption. We sourcing. I always have many kinds of suppliers from whom I source, and I'm careful that they give me the right kind of quality. Well, is there any other kind of principles of sourcing? I don't think, but any sourcing person must be aware of certain these things that I've been telling. Now let us go finally to various levels of partnerships in sourcing, which is what sourcing may be all about. At the first level, I have got something called as an ad hoc buyer. At the lowest level, I've got something called as ad hoc buying. What is the meaning of that? I am buying low quantity of products of acceptable quality from a single buyer in case of an emergency. That is called as ad hoc buying. I am buying low quality products of acceptable quality from very often one supplier, very often in an extreme condition or situation is called as ad hoc buying. Very often I do it with small shops or small organizations with whom I do ad hoc buying. Anyone who has worked in the industrial environment for some time would definitely know what some example of ad hoc buying is. After ad hoc buying comes the concept of transaction buying. What do I mean by this activity of transaction buying? Is that I am buying a definite amount of product for a short time duration from one or two suppliers who do not have much price differentiation, but the price between both the suppliers is the same. But I know the buyer and the seller in the sourcing function know each other fairly well. Is the next level of sourcing. I've got what is called as transaction buying. Very often, when you buy milk from the same supplier or a couple of suppliers, you're doing what's called as transaction buying because you know who is your supplier. And you have got some kind, though not a very strategic partnership with him, but you do have doing buying with him on a basis for quite some time. You might be having more than one supplier for it, but it's largely transactional. But the level of affinity, not affinity, but the level of relationship between the buyer and the seller is definitely more mature than in ad hoc buying. Now, why I'm telling these two things is that people must understand ad hoc buying situations. People also must understand transactional buying situations. In transactional buying, very often I've got many suppliers for the same product, but choose to buy from some of them, and both of them don't give me. There's not much price variation. Price is almost the same. The challenge is on availability. When I want something, who has got it? That is what that differentiates one transactional buyer from another buyer. The market is definitely more dynamic than what it is, but I've got something called as transactional buying. I go one step ahead. The next level in sourcing decisions is called as strategic partnerships. When I say strategic partnerships, I mean that among a set of buyers or sellers to me or from people from whom I used to source, I'm willing to take it to the next level where I'm going to make it to do some kind of partnership with him because I want the product that he's giving sometimes in more quantity or at a slightly lesser price than what is possible. Here, some kind, if I want something 100 every hour, some item 100 hour every hour, I decide the economics of the situation. 50 I buy it from a strategic partner, rest 50 I buy it from transactional buyers. I might make such decisions for some reason or the other because of certain pressures. However, strategic partnerships. What is in strategic partnerships? Sometimes I invest in his facilities or my person goes there and stays there and he's a part of that system for some time. Strategic partnership is not just that. Strategic partnership is not just that. Sometimes I give him some kind of other material support in so that he can come down on the cost. and he can manufacture more. Because I want to encourage someone, not encourage just like that, out of turn, but to get into some kind of strategy. But very often there is a financial participation of cash or time in the way such interactions are carried out. Strategic means I've got a very long term partnership with him and I am sourcing a large number of products from him over a given year, which is invariably a transactional relationship, and a relationship will definitely move into over a period of time because this activity of strategic partnership is beneficial both for both the partners involved. If I study the sourcing function of many of these of these airplane companies around the world, definitely they will have some kind of strategic partner. Firestone was for a long time a strategic partner supplying tires for Ford Motor Company. After some time, that partnership went awry because of environmental influence. But I've got a situation like that. I've got what's called a strategic partnership. Now, fine with that. That is one. That is the third level. The fourth level is a more dynamic level where I've got what is called as VMI, which is meant as vendor managed inventory. What is the meaning of vendor managed inventory? It is a slightly mature situation. The responsibility of supplying a given material for any manufacturing or related function is the locus of responsibility lies with the vendor. Vendor becomes some kind, not just a partner. He becomes some kind of an. It's not just a partner, a functioning mechanism of the organization itself, which means that he knows that 150 items have to reach this plant. It is very badly needed. He takes the responsibility. The responsibility of that is with him. He knows that it has to be done, and he sees that that means he is in real time. He understands the dynamics of the organization to which he is supplying, and accordingly he supplies all the items. In vendor managed inventory, you must understand one very important thing. Most of my strategic partners are in some kind of strategic partners between themselves at the lateral level, and at the same time they have a level with the organization to which they're supplying. It's important as well vendor managed inventory. VMI is you can it's not just vendor managed inventory, it's vendors managed inventory. Much of my locus of responsibility of getting materials and of into my organization is not just mine alone. It rests also in the hands of various kinds of suppliers whom I know for a long period of time, with whom I enjoy strategic relationships. But I've opened the gates so that I understand them all well. The responsibility is on them. They are to me more than just strategic partners. They involved in the manufacturing activity that I'm into in a more concerted and dedicated way. Is the idea behind vendor managed inventory. Now, I hope I have done some kind of a justice to this whole kind of subject of sourcing, and it's an area which is which has to a large extent become more simplified and easier, and at the same time complex because of the contrivance called the internet. And it is really because I know where to run to. 25 years back, I did not know where to run to when I had a sourcing problem. Today, I know where to run to. I might read the right kind of sourcing partners the internet might give me or it may not give me, but I might be making concerted searches of various kinds so that I finally find someone who can supply me something. Now, I have hope. I hope I have done some justice to the subject. Please study this function of sourcing. Some people who work like sourcing managers, where some people work like sourcing managers, and some of these principles what I described here might be of some use, and you don't make mistakes in the way you source. Is the idea behind making the short kind of an presentation or exposure. Thank you very much. This is P.O. Subhash from Bangalore, India.